Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. Now that my obligatory informative videos are done for the day, it's time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And I have had an enormous number of questions over the last couple of days about the rep challenges that OmarIsuf did on his channel with Bart, Kwan, and Silent Mike. So let me go ahead and put on my +5 out of Speechcraft and let's talk about it. Now, here's the thing that I want to say on this. You know, I kind of have two different sorts of perspective on all the stuff that they did, and I'll get into what they did in a minute. Number one, as a guy, just as a dude, understanding when you're hanging out with your bros, your friends, even with other guys, men are competitive. We like to do stuff just for fun, just to compare strength, to compare different things. Men are just competitive with each other. It's in our nature. So when I look at something like that as purely an informal, hey, just competing with the other guys, it's just to do stuff like almost when you're drinking or whatever, you do silly stuff, you know? And if we look at it just from that perspective, that's all it is. These guys had some fun. They had a good time. They're all lifters. They're all serious lifters. All three of these guys obviously take their training very, very seriously. They're all competitors or have competed in different strength sports. And, again, they all have athletic backgrounds. So these are guys who lift. They all take their lifting seriously. And it was just an informal thing. And as long as people don't try to think it's actual legit feats of strength, of real comparisons, then it's all good. Like, as long as it's just for fun. And that's what it appeared to be. It's just that some people want to take it further. And I even had a bunch of people like, Jason, why don't you do all these now? And it's like, because I'm in the middle of some very, very serious training with serious goals, and I really can't derail my training to just do silly stuff like this. Now, it's not to say that you guys haven't seen me do high rep work sets with 405 on the squat, right? And I'll probably start doing some rep work with 315 on the pause bench and stuff later, right? I'll do that as part of my normal training, but I'm not going to come in fresh and just say, oh man, let me see how many total reps I can get, replace my max effort or dynamic effort work with one of these. I'm just not going to do that. Because I'm not interested in it. But, the point is when you get over these guys doing it, the problem with comparing them, it's kind of like we already know how strong they all are. They all have competitive numbers. We know who's the strongest and weakest on different lifts. And when we start doing these informal things, it doesn't allow you to compare these guys fairly. Like if we were to go just purely off numbers and the counts they got, their strength disparities would be less than you think they are. People say, well, what do you mean? Like Bart Kwan, I don't know what he squats in competition, but if I were to take his 5 rep max there, which was actually 0, I would assume he's a terrible squatter. Like I would say that's a guy who squats 420, 425 tops based upon that performance. And it's because he didn't hit depth. His 5 rep max, when they were testing it, none of them hit depth. He was above parallel on every single rep. The same thing, you would watch these guys, and if we compared their actual legitimate strength, Omar won the rep challenge on the squat. But I can tell you, having watched them, that Silent Mike is a stronger squatter. People say, well, what do you mean? Because Silent Mike actually hit 9 legit squats. He hit 9 squats that were legit. All 9 of his reps counted. They all just barely broke parallel. That is a guy who is used to squatting 1 inch below parallel exactly, never higher, never lower, over and over and over consistently. You could tell that. He was very consistent. He just barely cut proper depth and not an inch lower 9 times in a row. Flawless. Omar got 13, but he only got like 7 or 8. Right? So his 13, at least 5, if not 6 of those, they were not. They were a couple inches high. They were not. Absolutely not to depth. I wouldn't count those. Like if someone were in training and I was actually training someone and they counted that as a 13 rep set, I would be like, no, that was a 7 rep set. You mark it as 7. Because you didn't do the full range of motion with the prescribed weight. You didn't do the programmed range of motion, so they don't count. Right? You didn't get the training effect you want. That was junk reps. So, I mean, whether you're talking about competitive or training perspective, that wouldn't have counted as a 13 rep set. It just wouldn't. So that's kind of the problems we run into. That you get over to like the bench and what they did, the benching was all over the place. Like I was actually shocked. I was shocked that every one of these guys who actually have good bench presses in comp were that weak for their rep work. Because, I mean, none of their reps were meet legal. Like, not one. They were all failed lockouts. They were all, like, some of it was ass off the bench. And these are all guys who've squatted 360 or benched 360 plus in comp. And it also shows you that rep work on bench, and that's what I found. Like for me personally, I'm really good at rep work on the bench press. Like people have been shocked at sometimes how low my comp maxes have been when I've gone to meets on this channel, because what have you guys seen me do? And I think some people are really surprised. I'm good at rep work even on the pause bench, because I know at one time since starting this channel at my gym during meet prep, I hit 5 reps with 315 on the bench, right? I straight up close grip 315 for 5 reps on camera. Then at comp 6 weeks later, I only went into the 330s, right? I didn't go much over that. I mean, I benched like 331 at the meet that I was peaking for and hit 315 for 5. So, I mean, that's always, it's interesting how that works, and that's something that people need to keep in mind. I've noticed that on the bench. I'm personally really good at rep work on the bench. I struggle sometimes with maxes, and it just has to do with the way our strength carries over on some lifts on one person versus the other. But if I were to go do that, if I were to go do the challenge they just did, I would probably get more reps on the bench than all of them. But I promise you all 3 of those guys have a slightly better max bench than me right now, right? I bet you they all do. So who's stronger on the bench? Well, they are, right? Because that's how it works. You're stronger based on what you can actually lift. Then kind of the pull-ups was an interesting one, because, you know, we watched some of this stuff and Bart got his butt handed to him on all this other stuff. Then we get to the pull-ups. Omar only got, what, 4 reps? Because I'm going to say on a pull-up, if you can't go to the bottom, it doesn't count, right? That's the hardest part of that pull-up is the bottom. There are muscles work there that don't get worked in the other parts. And if you stop 2 inches short of the bottom, and we just covered that the other day. I mean, even Jeff Cavalier said that, talking about pull-ups and chin-ups the other day. I agreed. I'm really big on getting that stretch at the bottom. I think it's important for your back development. It's actually important for your back development if you're going to use pull-ups and chin-ups. It is harder. And that bottom, hitting that bottom stretch is important. And, you know, you compared these guys, and Silent Mike did like, what, 1 rep that actually would have counted? I think he did like 1 rep. Omar did about 4, where they actually got to the bottom, right? They actually the scapula come apart. Bart gets to that, and he did like 1 million full range. He did like 1 million reps. I don't know what he did. I just stopped watching when he got to like 20. I just quit, because I'm like, they all counted. Like the guy actually did 20 plus by that point. I just quit counting at that point, quit watching the video. I'm like, okay, this guy's a beast on pull-ups. You know, and he got smoked on everything else. And then the guy comes over to pull-ups and is just like, really? Wow, he smoked it. You know, and I mean by such an enormous margin that the other guys couldn't even do full range of motion for more than a few reps. And he just cranked out like 30. I think he ended up getting 30, something like that. It was ridiculous. So the dude is a beast on the pull-up, and I mean, I'm going to give credit for that. Even though I'm not a fan of rep challenges, I'm going to give credit for that. And that's kind of my problem with the rep challenges. You know, people get into rep challenges, and what do they turn into? Who can cheat the most? Who can cut range of motion the most to try to hit this target rep and win something? That's not a test of strength. That's just a test of, can you ego lift and flop around, and how far can we lift our ass off the bench. And like every one of those guys, the benching, none of them locked out. They said, we're going to try to lock out. There were no lockouts. They didn't lock out at all. None of them. I don't think I saw a single rep locked out on their benching. Butts coming off the bench. All sorts of nonsense, you know, and so that's the problem we run into with some of these friendly rep challenges. They're not always tests of strength, and a lot of you guys will do it and like, oh, I want to do an AMRAP set, but it's like, you're not getting it. I mean, and I would say the same thing when it comes over. Let's talk about training. Let's talk about doing AMRAP sets for trainings. We can carry that over. AMRAPs where you're cheating to get the last 5 reps. You're bouncing on the deadlift, touch and go on the deadlift, not pausing on the bench, skipping lockouts, cutting range of motion short to get your AMRAPs. You're not getting the training effect you want from that. When you talk about an AMRAP set, it's supposed to be using the correct range of motion and technique that you would even on a maximum lift, right? You want perfect reps. It's how many perfect reps can you do before it breaks down, right? That's what an AMREP is. And honestly, if you really wanted to do AMREP challenges to compare different people's strength, you got to have some sort of standards in place. You know, you got to be realistic about it. Everyone's got to be following the same rules. And to take competitive lifts, though, and to start allowing cheating for people who train the competitive lifts seriously, you're messing up their actual training and the motor unit learning and everything else, letting them do the silly stuff trying to win a challenge. So I'm just not a fan of that sort of stuff personally. But does that mean they didn't have a good time? No, it looked like it was fun. It looks like they all had a good time. They're all strong guys, and they had fun doing it. So, you know, if we leave it at that, then hey, that's great, all good. But, you know, if people want to take that as serious strength challenges, not so much for some of the reasons that were pretty obvious. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.